The journal's leather-bound pages felt brittle beneath my fingers as I turned them carefully, unfolding Irik's faded handwriting by lantern light. The words he'd penned centuries ago drew me deeper into another world, one buried beneath frost and shadow, a world I'd learned to fear as much as I longed to understand it. Irik's writing that night spoke of a forest older than memory itself. He and his warband had been driven there by winter storms that scattered their fleet, forcing them ashore near the village of Vargland, a place long abandoned, shunned even by the bravest Vikings. The trees there were impossibly dense, twisted together like skeletal fingers, as if they'd grown to keep something hidden, or perhaps to keep something inside. He described the forest as silent in a way that defied nature, an oppressive quiet that smothered every sound. Birds refused to sing, animals stayed hidden, and even the wind seemed afraid to disturb the eerie stillness. It was a silence Irik said he could feel watching him, a quiet presence he couldn't shake no matter how far they traveled. Deep within these strange woods, Irik and his men discovered ancient stones arranged in a wide, deliberate circle. Carved upon their moss-covered faces were faded runes that glowed dimly, casting a faint green light in the gathering darkness. He wrote how their glow drew him closer, though every instinct warned him not to approach. As Irik hesitated before the standing stones, something moved just beyond the edge of their eerie light. From the shadows stepped a woman of unearthly beauty, pale as moonlight, her eyes mesmerizing in their quiet intensity. Her long hair shimmered gently, as though woven from threads of silver, and her voice was soft and musical, almost too perfect to be human.
"Strangers,"
she whispered, beckoning them with a slender hand.
"the night is cold and my hearth is warm. My forests is kind to those who respect its ways."
Irik wrote of feeling a sudden, irresistible pull, as if his feet were no longer his to command. His companion Bjorn grabbed his shoulder in silent warning, clearly sensing the danger, but Irik could not break free from her gaze, enchanted by the promise hidden behind her gentle smile. Only once he stepped past the rune-marked stones did he notice the flickering shadows behind her, figures warped and twisted, swaying in quiet agony, as if trapped between life and death. By then, it was already too late to turn back. I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Irik's final words on that page. Somehow, across centuries, I felt that ancient silence pressing in around me now, as if the Hollow Queen herself still lingered somewhere just beyond my lantern's fragile glow. I turned the page, my pulse quickening as I followed the inked lines deeper into Irik's encounter. His handwriting became shakier, as though recalling this memory physically drained him. I knew by now to trust that sign. Whatever happened next had truly shaken him, a man I'd come to think of as fearless. Irik wrote how the strange woman guided them through the shadow-thickened woods toward a clearing deep within the forest. Her steps made no sound on the forest floor, and though it was winter, her pale feet left no impression in the frost-covered earth. His men followed uneasily, torches held high against the encroaching darkness, exchanging silent glances as they went. Bjorn, he noted, kept close, eyes locked suspiciously on their enigmatic host. Soon they arrived at a large hut that stood apart from the surrounding wilderness. It was beautiful, covered in moss and ivy, nestled within a ring of trees, as if the forest itself had grown protective around it. Smoke curled lazily from the roof, promising warmth and comfort. But as they drew nearer, Irik noticed strange carvings along its walls. Faces etched deep into the wood, their expressions twisted somewhere between agony and ecstasy. He wrote that their eyes seemed to follow him, pleading, silently begging for release. Inside, the hut was warm and inviting, lit by embers glowing gently in a stone fireplace. Freshly woven blankets were laid across wooden benches, and bowls filled with stew waited as though prepared just moments before their arrival. Yet, Irik noted with unease, no servants nor any sign of others appeared to share this shelter. It was as if it had all sprung from the earth itself, waiting for their arrival.
Eat,
The woman whispered, gesturing to the bowls.
rest your weary bones. Morning will guide your path home.
Irik's warband, tired and hungry from their journey, cautiously accepted her hospitality. Yet Bjorn alone refused, sitting stiffly beside Irik, his wary eyes fixed on the woman who now moved among the men with quiet grace. Irik tried to eat, but the stew tasted strangely bitter, a flavor he could not identify. Earthy, heavy with herbs, and something else he wrote he could not place, but left his mouth feeling coated in an unsettling sweetness. As the evening deepened, the woman began softly humming a song that echoed eerily against the walls. It was beautiful, yet haunting, seeming to flow around the room like living smoke. Irik's eyes grew heavy, and as sleep began pulling him downward, he saw Bjorn still awake, gripping his axe tightly, fighting the lull of her hypnotic melody. His final entry for that night was brief, scrawled with a heavy, desperate hand.
Dreams have come now. Dreams that are not my own. I see faces trapped in the trees, mouths open but voiceless, eyes wide with a terror. She stands among them, hollow-backed and smiling. The forest hungers.
My breath caught as I closed the journal, my own pulse echoing loud enough to drown out the night. Irik's warning echoed in my mind, and I glanced nervously toward the dark windows of my cabin, imagining shadows outside, swaying silently beneath the moonlight. I hesitated only a moment, fingers lingering nervously on the edge of Irik's journal before turning another page. By now, I understood the dangers hidden within these pages. Each word could pull me deeper into darkness, closer to truths better left forgotten. Yet, the hunger to know more outweighed any fear. The pages rustled softly as I revealed what Irik wrote next, each line becoming increasingly frantic, as though he raced to record his memories before they vanished like smoke. He wrote of waking abruptly, shaken from restless dreams by Bjorn's firm hand gripping his arm. The hut was now eerily silent, the fire having died to dim, ember-red eyes staring out from the fireplace, casting strange shadows along the walls. Bjorn's face was pale, his eyes wide and fearful, as he pointed toward the place where the mysterious woman had stood earlier. Now it was empty, and the blankets that had covered their men lay scattered, abandoned on the benches.
They're gone.
Bjorn whispered harshly, his voice strained.
Every last one of them vanished into the night. We must leave now.
Irik rose unsteadily, his head spinning from the lingering effects of whatever they had eaten. He wrote that as he stood, the hut seemed suddenly different, older somehow, the wood rotting and warped. The beautiful carvings now twisted grotesquely. Their faces looked tortured, mouths frozen in soundless screams. He could not understand how they had failed to see it earlier. Together, Irik and Bjorn stumbled from the hut into the chill night air, frost crunching beneath their boots. The forest stretched around them endlessly, the trees looming tall and silent, their branches tangled like grasping fingers. Irik described the moon overhead as pale and sickly, casting a strange, muted glow across the clearing, making everything appear surreal, dreamlike, an in-between world he was not meant to linger in. As they moved cautiously through the forest, Bjorn held his torch high, flames sputtering and struggling against the oppressive darkness. Irik noted how the shadows twisted and danced unnaturally, taking shapes that hinted at figures watching from just beyond the torch's reach. He tried to dismiss them as tricks of exhausted eyes and fearful imagination, yet deep down, he knew they were real. Then, from somewhere far ahead, they heard a voice, a familiar voice, trembling, pleading. Irik recognized it immediately as Haldor, one of his men, calling weakly from within the trees.
Irik, help me, please.
Bjorn froze, his grip tightening on his axe.
It cannot be.
He murmured softly, eyes wide with dread.
We saw him vanish.
But the voice called again, this time more desperately, closer somehow, and Irik felt himself take a step forward, heart-wrenching with the urge to find his lost companion. Bjorn grabbed his shoulder roughly, forcing Irik to meet his gaze.
Listen closely.
He whispered urgently.
That is not Haldor.
They stood in tense silence as the voice called out once more, now shifting subtly, twisting unnaturally. Irik felt ice crawl up his spine as the voice deepened, growing rough, distorted, no longer human. Then, from behind, another voice whispered his name, sweet and inviting. The woman's voice, gently mocking, filled with soft laughter.
We must run,
Bjorn rasped, fear raw in his voice.
The Hollow Queen has chosen us next.
The last words of that page were barely legible, scrawled in frantic haste.
She walks behind us now. The forest will never let us go.
I shuddered, closing the journal quickly, glancing around my dimly lit cabin as the walls seemed suddenly closer, the silence deeper, and the night outside waiting patiently, whispering of secrets it longed to share. My fingers trembled slightly as I reopened Irik's journal, feeling the weight of his dread creeping steadily into my own bones. The words on the page seemed to pull at me, drawing me back into the nightmare of those woods, closer to something ancient and malevolent. A creature whose whispers I swore I could almost hear echoing faintly through the cabin walls. Irik's next entries were fragmented, hurried lines capturing brief flashes of his panicked escape through the forest. He wrote of running blindly with Bjorn beside him, their breath ragged and harsh against the oppressive silence. Behind them, voices rose and fell like a twisted choir, sometimes familiar, sometimes monstrous, always calling their names. They resisted the urge to look back, knowing somehow that a single glance could bind them forever to the trees. The forest itself seemed to shift around them, rearranging in ways that defied all reason. Paths twisted back upon themselves. Clearings appeared and vanished without warning. Irik described feeling disoriented, as though they were trapped in a labyrinth that breathed and moved, guiding them inexorably towards something waiting patiently at its heart. At last, exhausted and desperate, they stumbled into a clearing ringed with ancient, towering oaks, their branches tangled high above, forming a cathedral roof of blackened limbs. At its center stood a single, massive stone etched with runes, pulsing faintly like a living heart. Around its base lay countless bones, bleached white beneath the pale moonlight, half hidden beneath layers of moss and fallen leaves. Bjorn froze in place, his torch raised defensively, flames dancing uncertainly in the still air.
Gods preserve us.
He murmured, his voice choked with dread.
We have been led here.
Irik's blood ran cold as the forest grew deathly still once more, the voices abruptly silenced. For a moment, all he heard was the frantic rhythm of his own heartbeat, hammering loudly in his chest. Then, slowly, as if emerging from the very shadows themselves, The woman stepped gracefully into view, her beautiful face serene and unreadable in the flickering torchlight.
You run so swiftly.
She whispered gently, her voice soft, almost sorrowful.
Yet all paths here lead back to me. This forest holds no escape for those who see my face.
Release us!
Irik demanded, though he knew his voice betrayed the fear he desperately sought to hide.
Let us leave this cursed place.
She tilted her head slightly, as though amused by his defiance.
Why would you leave, brave one?
She asked sweetly, her eyes shimmering softly.
I offer you peace, everlasting rest within the forest's embrace. Many have found comfort here.
As she spoke, Irik watched in horror as the shadows around her writhed and shifted, forming indistinct figures that stretched toward them, silent, pleading. He glimpsed hollow eyes, gaping mouths, faces he recognized, men from his warband, twisted and transformed, trapped forever between death and something far worse.
You see,
The woman smiled softly, her expression both kind and terrifying.
your friends have joined me already. Stay, and know peace.
Bjorn's torch flickered, nearly extinguishing as he took a hesitant step backward.
We cannot fight this.
He whispered hoarsely.
She is older than our gods, older than this land itself. She is death wrapped in beauty.
Irik's final words on that page were scrawled hastily, ink smeared by shaking hands.
She waits patiently, knowing we cannot resist forever. The trees whisper that we are already hers.
I closed the journal again, heart pounding, and stared silently at my darkened window. Somewhere outside, beneath the moonlit forest that surrounded my cabin, I thought I heard faint whispers rising from the trees. Voices calling softly, inviting me to step outside, to join them beneath the watchful gaze of something ancient and endlessly patient. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hands, and turned yet another brittle page. Irik's handwriting had grown more desperate now, barely recognizable from the steady script I'd grown accustomed to. His words spoke of a hopelessness that felt palpable, reaching out from the ink-stained paper to grip my heart with icy fingers. Irik wrote of the moment he and Bjorn had fled the clearing, leaving behind the silent figures and the woman's haunting laughter. Their flight through the forest became a blur of tangled branches, clawing roots, and whispered taunts. Each direction they turned led them deeper into confusion, circling endlessly back to places they'd already seen. Standing stones pulsing softly, twisted trees whose bark bore screaming faces. Time itself seemed to lose meaning in those cursed woods. Irik described how hours, or perhaps days, passed without a glimpse of sunlight or starry sky. Only the dim glow of an endless twilight filtered through branches that never parted. Hunger gnawed at them. Thirst burned their throats. Yet no stream or path led toward salvation, only deeper into the Hollow Queen's dominion. He wrote of the whispers growing louder, clearer, as if unseen mouths pressed close to his ears, promising relief from pain and exhaustion if he surrendered willingly. Bjorn became increasingly withdrawn, eyes hollow with despair, muttering prayers to gods whose voices seemed distant and indifferent in this forsaken place. Then, Irik's words took a chilling turn. He described the night when Bjorn finally broke, how he'd awakened to find his companion standing at the edge of their makeshift camp, staring silently into the darkness with a vacant, haunted expression.
She calls to me, Irik.
Bjorn murmured softly, eyes glistening, fixed on something unseen.
Her voice promises rest. We cannot escape her. Perhaps we never could.
Irik begged him to resist, to hold on to hope even as it slipped through his own fingers. Yet Bjorn only shook his head sadly, offering a resigned, weary smile before stepping forward, melting silently into the shadows that swallowed him whole. Irik chased after him, screaming his friend's name, but found only emptiness, silence echoing mockingly back. Alone now, Irik wandered the forest, tormented by visions. The trees appeared to whisper secrets just beyond his understanding, their voices mocking him with every rustle. He saw faces trapped within their bark: Bjorn, Haldor, and the rest of his lost crew, all staring mournfully, pleading for release he could not give. Finally, stumbling from exhaustion, he fell to his knees near a small clearing ringed by ancient stones. In their center stood the Hollow Queen, her arms outstretched, face serene and compassionate, eyes shining softly.
You need not suffer.
She whispered tenderly.
The forest will embrace you. Your pain will end. Your friends await you, Irik.
Her voice was soothing, irresistible, reaching into his mind, unraveling his will. He felt himself begin to rise, moving toward her open arms, yet something deep within him still resisted, a spark of defiance refusing to yield. His final line on the page was smeared, nearly illegible, but it carried the weight of a desperate resolve.
I will fight her hold, even if the trees consume my flesh. She will not have me.
I shut the journal once more, feeling chilled, vulnerable, as though Irik's defiance had somehow placed me directly beneath the Hollow Queen's gaze. Outside my window, the trees shifted softly in the night wind, their branches brushing against one another, almost like whispers, urging me to step outside, to join those already lost to the woods. I could feel the weight of Irik's words pressing in on me as I opened the journal again, his desperation pulling me deeper into the nightmare. His resistance had not come without cost, though. His next entries were fractured, written in quick, jagged strokes, as though he feared the forest might devour the very words before he finished them. Irik wrote of a final, agonizing confrontation in the heart of the forest, a place even darker and colder than the rest. He and Bjorn had wandered farther into the wilderness after the latter's disappearance, hopelessly searching for any sign of the others. But the forest seemed to close in tighter with every step, as if it was no longer just a place. It was a living entity, aware of their every movement. And then, one night, after what felt like an eternity of wandering, they found it, the very heart of the forest, a place where the trees grew impossibly thick, their trunks towering like columns of dark stone, forming an ancient, unsettling cathedral of shadows. At its center stood a great stone arch, carved with runes older than any Irik had ever seen. The stone was cold and slick, covered with an unnatural slime that glistened faintly in the moonlight. As they approached the arch, the air grew thick with an unbearable pressure, a weight that pressed against their lungs. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their roots twisting like serpents beneath the earth. Irik felt the first stirrings of real terror, as though the land itself were conspiring against him, pushing him to his knees. And there, beneath the arch, stood the Hollow Queen once again. This time, her beauty more terrifying than before. Her skin had become almost translucent, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface, like blood-filled rivers running through marble. Her long silver hair shifted unnaturally, as though it moved of its own accord, twisting around her like a halo of living mist.
You have come far, Irik,
she said, her voice low and melodic, but there was no warmth in it now.
Farther than any mortal should. You seek to defy me, but it is already too late.
The air around them seemed to warp and ripple, the very fabric of the forest bending to her will. Irik's mind screamed for him to run, but his legs were frozen, his body unwilling to move as the Hollow Queen approached him, her long fingers stretching toward him like branches of an ancient tree.
He offers the peace of eternal rest,
She whispered, almost as if speaking to herself.
but you choose pain. You will never leave this place, Eerie, not while the forest lives.
Irik, still struggling against the weight of her power, forced his body to stand. His legs shook violently, his breath coming in ragged gasps.
I will never surrender.
He spat, his voice raw with defiance. The Hollow Queen's smile twisted into something far darker.
Then you shall suffer as your friends have. You will join them in the forest's embrace, lost, forgotten, a part of me.
As she spoke, Irik felt the ground beneath him tremble, the roots of the trees rising like monstrous claws, reaching for his legs, dragging him toward the earth. His body was pulled, inch by inch, down into the soil, the darkness closing in around him. But just as the roots were about to claim him, he heard a voice, faint but unmistakable. It was Bjorn's voice, twisted and broken, but still familiar.
Irik, you must choose. There is always a choice.
Irik fought to break free, his muscles screaming in protest. The ground was cold, wet, but he refused to give in. His fingers clawed at the dirt, pulling himself from the earth's grasp, inch by painful inch. Finally, with a great effort, he managed to rise, though his strength was fading, his body weak and trembling. The Hollow Queen's laughter rang out, shrill and mocking, echoing through the trees.
You are so stubborn,
She said, her tone filled with amusement.
but you will learn, Irit. This forest holds power beyond your understanding. You cannot defy me forever.
But Irik's final words on the page, written with trembling hands, were resolute, despite the overwhelming dread consuming him.
I will find a way to destroy you, Hollow Queen.
I closed the journal slowly, my breath shallow, as though the air in my own cabin had thinned, leaving me breathless. The walls seemed to close in, the silence growing louder with each passing moment. Something in the woods, something alive, was waiting. And I knew it wasn't just Irik trapped in that nightmare anymore. I hesitated briefly, fingertips brushing the rough surface of Irik's journal, the weight of his words now almost tangible. Each page I read brought his dread closer, as if the centuries between us were dissolving, leaving nothing but a thin veil separating my cabin from that ancient, haunted forest. The entries following Irik's confrontation with the Hollow Queen grew sparse, as though putting the horror to paper drained what little remained of his strength. But still, he pressed on, determined to record his story, perhaps hoping that someday, someone like me might find it, learn from it, or even finish what he had begun. Irik wrote of fleeing blindly after escaping the grasp of the Hollow Queen, his body battered, torn, and exhausted. He no longer trusted his senses. The forest twisted around him like a living creature, pathways shifting, trees whispering his name. Hunger and thirst had long since blurred into a distant, dull ache. He stumbled forward, driven by sheer determination alone. At last, he wrote of discovering a narrow path, hidden beneath twisted vines and tangled roots. It looked different, older, somehow untouched by the Hollow Queen's presence. A flicker of hope sparked within him, urging him forward into the unknown. The path led downward, deeper into the earth, until he stood before an opening carved directly into a massive, moss-covered rock. A faint light shimmered inside, gentle yet inviting. Irik hesitated, wary of another trick, but something about this place felt different. He He stepped into the cavern, breath held tightly, body tense with anticipation. Inside, the cavern walls shimmered with veins of quartz, reflecting a pale, ethereal glow. It seemed untouched by the corruption above, pure, almost sacred. At its center rested an ancient stone altar, carved with runes that pulsed softly, resonating quietly like a heartbeat. And atop it lay a single blade, gleaming faintly, as though waiting patiently for him. As Irik approached cautiously, the whispers returned, softer this time, gentle voices urging him forward. He recognized one immediately. It was Bjorn, clearer and stronger now, his voice filled with a calm reassurance he thought lost forever.
Take the blade, Irik.
Bjorn murmured quietly.
It is your only hope. She fears it. She fears what it represents.
Irik lifted the blade from the altar, and a surge of warmth filled him, as though some ancient power had chosen him for this very moment. He felt it, a strength returning, purpose driving away despair. For the first time since entering the cursed woods, he felt a chance at survival. Yet the moment he touched the blade, the cavern trembled violently, dust and debris raining from the ceiling. The gentle voices faded, replaced by the Hollow Queen's furious laughter, echoing from above, piercing through stone.
You believe a mere blade can stop me?
She taunted, her voice thick with scorn.
You know nothing, mortal. This forest and I are one. You cannot kill what does not truly live.
Irik's response, scrawled hastily at the bottom of the page, was defiant, fierce, and filled with resolve.
Even if it costs my soul, I will find a way, even if it means sacrificing myself to darkness. She will not have the final victory.
My fingers shook as I closed the journal again, a chill settling deep within my bones. Somewhere beyond my window, the wind howled softly, carrying whispers of a voice that sounded far too much like the Hollow Queen, patiently waiting, knowing I'd come this far, knowing I'd see this through to whatever end awaited. I opened the journal once more, Irik's words guiding me further into a nightmare centuries old, yet chillingly close. His writing became steadier now, as though finding that strange blade had given him newfound clarity, purpose strong enough to momentarily keep the darkness at bay. He wrote of emerging from the cavern, blade in hand, its ancient metal glowing softly, illuminating a path he hadn't seen before. He knew instinctively the forest had changed, as if recoiling from the weapon he now carried. The trees drew back their branches reluctantly, their whispers fading into uneasy silence, as though uncertain how to deal with this unexpected defiance. But the Hollow Queen was not so easily thwarted. As he traveled, he began hearing cries in the distance, voices of men he had known, screams twisted in agony, echoing hauntingly between the trees. She was tormenting him, he realized, using the suffering of his lost companions to weaken his resolve, trying to break him before their final confrontation. Yet Irik pressed on, gripping the strange blade tighter with every agonized voice he heard. He wrote how it guided him unerringly through the maze of shifting shadows, as though forged precisely for this purpose, to cut through illusions, to defy the Hollow Queen herself. Eventually, he found himself back at the rune-carved arch deep in the forest, the heart of the Queen's power. She stood beneath it, her beauty now fully revealed as monstrous, twisted by the forest she controlled. Her silver hair hung limp, tangled with vines, her hollow back exposed, rotting and empty, filled only with shadows and decay.
You think you can defeat me?
She mocked softly, eyes glistening coldly beneath the moonlight.
Countless warriors have tried, yet here I remain, stronger with each passing season.
I'm not here to defeat you.
Irik replied steadily, raising the glowing blade between them.
I'm here to free them! All those souls trapped in your forest.
She laughed bitterly, eyes narrowing dangerously.
They are mine, Irik, just as you shall be mine.
As she spoke, shadows erupted from the ground, twisting into shapes of men. His men, but changed, monstrous, hollow-eyed. They stumbled toward him, their faces pleading silently, even as their bodies obeyed her commands. Reaching out, with hands like twisted branches, eager to drag him down with them. Irik hesitated, heart breaking at the sight, but knew what he had to do. The blade flared brightly, as though sensing his resolve, and he charged forward, fighting his way through the tortured souls that once fought bravely at his side. With each swing of the weapon, the shadows dissipated into smoke, releasing tortured sighs of relief and whispered gratitude.
You cannot free them all.
The Hollow Queen shrieked furiously, her calm facade finally shattered.
They belong to me forever.
But Irik kept fighting, driven not by hope, but by a promise he'd made silently. A promise to every lost man who once stood loyal at his side. His last words on the page were bold, etched with conviction, inked in defiance.
She believes I fight to survive. I fight for redemption. Even if my bones become part of this cursed forest, I will not leave my men behind.
I lowered the journal slowly, feeling tears burn in my eyes, unexpectedly moved by Irik's determination. But as I sat there, caught up in his desperate battle, I became acutely aware of the whispers returning outside my cabin. Soft laughter mixed with something darker. A presence patiently watching, waiting for my own resolve to falter. My heart pounded relentlessly as I turned another page, knowing Irik's final struggle was nearing its inevitable climax. His handwriting now carried fierce, unyielding strokes, as though each letter were a blade swung defiantly in the face of despair. Irik described his furious battle against the Hollow Queen's shadows, his ancient blade cleaving through the twisted remnants of his former companions. With every strike, he released another tortured soul, their whispers of thanks blending into a sorrowful chorus, haunting but resolute. Yet each victory drained him, exhaustion creeping steadily into his muscles, threatening to collapse him to the forest floor. The Hollow Queen, her patience finally shattered, approached him with terrifying grace, shadows swirling furiously around her. Her eyes were no longer gentle. They burned with a fury centuries in the making.
You fight bravely, but it means nothing.
She hissed.
Each life you free has strengthened my hold on your own. You will take their place, bound to this forest, a guardian of my solitude for eternity.
Irik raised his blade defiantly, even as his limbs trembled with fatigue.
Never.
He whispered fiercely.
You've preyed on suffering long enough. It ends tonight.
With a scream of rage, the Hollow Queen lunged forward, shadows coalescing into claws, branches bending to strike at Irik from every side. He wrote of barely dodging her relentless assault, the blade his only shield, each desperate parry weakening him further. He knew he could not fight forever, not against a force so ancient, so relentless. Yet, in that hopeless moment, clarity struck him. The Hollow Queen and the forest were one, bound by something far older and darker than simple enchantment. The rune-carved arch, pulsing with eldritch power, was the heart of her strength, the nexus of her eternal curse. Realizing this, Irik gathered every ounce of remaining strength, sprinting through the chaos toward the arch. The queen, recognizing his intent, shrieked in desperation, shadows reaching frantically to stop him. He felt them tear at his skin, clawing to pull him down. Yet he pressed onward, determined beyond pain. Reaching the ancient stone, he raised the blade high above his head, preparing for a final, desperate strike. The Hollow Queen's scream pierced his ears, filled with anguish and hatred, echoing through the forest like a death knell.
You doom yourself, Irik.
She wailed, voice twisted with despair.
Destroy me, and you will be trapped forever.
He paused for a fraction of a second, her words striking deep. He knew the cost of this blow, but his hesitation vanished as swiftly as it came. He remembered Bjorn's last words, the voices of his lost men, and understood the sacrifice required of him. With a final cry of defiance, he drove the blade deep into the rune-carved stone. The forest exploded in blinding light, power surging outward with a force that knocked him backward, stealing the breath from his lungs. His final scrawled words on that page echoed hauntingly.
The trees burn with fury. If I must become part of this forest to break her curse, then so be it. I embrace eternity, knowing my men are free.
I closed the journal again, feeling an unexplainable sorrow mixed with pride. Irik's sacrifice rippling through time, touching my heart centuries later. Yet, even in that moment, something felt unfinished, as if the Hollow Queen's story had not truly ended on that night long ago. Outside my cabin window, the trees swayed gently, branches whispering softly as though echoing Irik's sacrifice, or perhaps mocking it. I took a slow breath before turning another fragile page, sensing that Irik's story had now entered its final, darkest act. His handwriting grew faint, uncertain, as though each word drained him. Yet I felt compelled to continue, to see his journey through to its bitter end, no matter the cost. Irik described awakening amid smoldering trees and scorched earth, the forest around him charred and lifeless, the vibrant darkness replaced by ash-gray ruin. His body ached, every breath burning his lungs. But his first thought was not of himself, only of the Hollow Queen. Was she truly gone? Had his sacrifice been enough? He rose shakily, leaning on the ancient blade for support. Yet even as he stood, something felt wrong. He glanced down, horror creeping through his chest. His skin bore markings like twisting vines, glowing faintly green, as though the runes from the arch now lived within him. Panic surged briefly, but was quickly replaced by grim resignation. He understood the truth. In breaking the Hollow Queen's hold, he had become part of the forest, the guardian he had vowed never to become. Yet the whispers were silent now, the forest's hold weakened, if not entirely destroyed. He wandered aimlessly through the wreckage, hoping desperately to find signs of his companions, freed souls, or perhaps survivors, but found only silence and the burned remains of a world forever changed by his choices. As night fell again, Irik returned to the clearing where the rune-carved arch once stood. In its place lay shattered stone, cracked and lifeless, but something else waited there. A faint, shimmering form, familiar yet changed. The Hollow Queen knelt amidst the rubble, translucent and fading, no longer monstrous, her eyes filled with a profound sadness.
You have broken the curse,
She whispered softly, her voice barely audible.
but you will carry its burden forever. This place will hold you now, as it held me.
Irik stepped closer, blade lowered, watching her warily.
Then I have failed. My men may be free, but I remain imprisoned.
She smiled gently, sorrowfully.
No, brave warrior. You have succeeded beyond measure. The forest no longer hungers. My thirst has ended. Only echoes will remain.
Irik's writing turned mournful as he recorded her final words.
You must remain here, guardian of the woods, forever bound by sacrifice. But you're a story. The courage you showed, the pain you endured will live on, carried by whispers in the wind, waiting to find ears willing to listen.
Then she faded slowly into the darkness, leaving only silence in her wake. Irik's next words struck deep, shaking me as I read.
My time is ending. I feel myself becoming part of the trees, my flesh and bone, surrendering to bark and roots. I write these final words, knowing that someday another will read them. And when they do, they must understand. The Hollow Queen may be gone, but a forest waits patiently for another to claim its heart.
The final lines blurred before me, my own eyes stinging.
Beware the whispers. Beware the trees. Beware your own heart, lest you become as I am, another guardian trapped forever in this haunted place.
My cabin suddenly felt suffocatingly small, the walls pressing closer, shadows thickening. Outside, the wind rose again, the trees rustling urgently as if echoing Irik's last warning, a warning that now felt directed entirely at me. I sat quietly for a long moment, the weight of Irik's words sinking deeply into my chest. I turned the fragile pages slowly, expecting to find a resolution, some final clarity. Instead, I discovered another entry, written hastily in Irik's familiar, desperate script. He had awakened at dawn, lying amidst the ruins of the rune-carved arch, blade still clutched tightly in his trembling fingers. The forest around him was silent, eerily still, but somehow different, calmer, as though freed from a terrible nightmare. Yet Irik's heart still ached with uncertainty. Had he truly defeated the Hollow Queen, or merely delayed the inevitable? He rose slowly, limbs aching, but determined to find answers. He wrote how the ancient blade, now cool and silent, seemed drained of its former power, as though its purpose had been fulfilled. With the weapon at his side, he stumbled toward the edge of the forest, drawn by instinct toward open skies and sunlight, things he feared he might never see again. Eventually, Irik broke free from the tree line and stood beneath the pale morning sun, breathing deeply, relief washing over him. But as he turned back one last time, gazing into the shadowed woods, doubt stirred again. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, whispering softly, words he could almost, but not quite, understand. The Hollow Queen's voice echoed distantly in his mind, sorrowful yet oddly comforting.
You have won your freedom today, Irik, but nothing lasts forever. Remember, every forest has its guardian.
His final lines, scribbled carefully, carried an uneasy warning.
I leave these woods now, but something within tells me the Hollow Queen's story isn't truly over. Beware to those who find these words. This place is patient, and eternity means nothing to trees.
I closed the journal gently, fingers trembling slightly, pulse racing from the weight of Irik's final words. Outside my cabin, the wind sighed softly through the trees, branches swaying in the moonlight, shadows dancing across the snow-dappled ground. For a moment, I thought I heard a whisper drifting softly toward me, the forest calling gently, perhaps curious, perhaps patient, perhaps testing my own resolve. Yet this time, I stayed where I was, firmly rooted in the safety of my cabin. Irik's story was a powerful warning. The woods around us were older than memory, older than the stories we told, and perhaps wiser. They watched silently, patiently waiting for the next guardian to step forward. But tonight, at least, it would not be me. I rose slowly, and placed the journal safely back onto the shelf, carefully positioning it among the other worn, leather-bound tomes I'd collected over the years, each one another whispered warning, another glimpse into darkness. Irik had escaped once, though his fate remained uncertain, and somehow that felt more haunting than if he had surrendered fully. Stepping quietly to the window, I stared out into the darkened forest, its trees stretching endlessly into shadows. Part of me wondered if the Hollow Queen was still there, hidden somewhere deep within, sleeping lightly and waiting patiently for the next lost soul to wander close enough to hear her whispers. But tonight, I was safe and grateful for that small mercy. Still, as I extinguished the lantern, plunging the cabin into gentle darkness, a quiet, uneasy thought lingered in my mind. Some stories never truly end. They simply wait, patiently, for someone new to discover them. If this story left you with a lingering chill, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story from Irik's journal. And tell me, would you have resisted the Hollow Queen or surrendered to her eternal embrace? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See you next time.